full dredging for the marina to extend the life another 10 to 15 years. In addition, we have a breakwater, which does help prevent the silting in of the marina. It's pretty old and it doesn't really work as it was originally designed many, many years ago. Um, um, a replacement and rejuvenation of that breakwater would really help extend the life of any dredging project that the city undertakes. So that would mean it would be longer between dredgings. It would, thus saving the city money in the long run. In addition, the marina was designed many, many decades ago when the boating preferences of the public were different. We're finding out through our research in various marinas and port districts throughout the state and also outside of the state that the boating choices are a little different than they were 40 years or 50 years ago. And a reconfiguration of the marina to accommodate current modern standards for boating would be beneficial to the life of the marina and also to the boating public as well. And also a connection to downtown. There is a bit of a distance between where the marina is located and downtown. And if that connection was made a little bit more better, for lack of a better word, a little bit more cohesive, investments were made in that respect, then that would not only improve the usability and function of the marina, but also improve the economic development and the activity within downtown. There are other items also brought up by the community that require funding. For example, future parks and recreation facilities such as indoor recreation facility or recreation center, various economic development programs. We're working on ideas for economic development. We have some already, and we're continuing to work on more as we develop a plan. And those elements do require funding. And also, we have some pretty old facilities in the city. For example, the police station is many, many decades old, and we have funding in there for next year to replace the roof. But there's other areas that, you know, because of deferred maintenance and because of just the age of the building, it's getting to the point where maybe in the next 5 to 10 years, it will no longer be able to function as we need it. And also, we are a growing city, and the police station grew organically over the years. It was used for other uses back in the past, and we've just kind of made additions and slapped on improvements over time. And that's just another item that was discussed by City Council as a need for replacement in the near to midterm. So about a local business and occupation tax. So when these ideas came forward from the City Council back in the spring, we went ahead and looked up potential revenue sources to help fund these ideas. So we went to the Municipal Resource Service Center, the MRSC, which is basically a nonprofit think tank which contains a lot of information regarding local government finances and local government public administration and other good government type reports and information. And they indicated that the state has provided cities with 4 major sources of general revenue. The first is our property tax. And as you may or may not know, property taxes are limited to growth of 1% plus new construction. New construction usually comes in at 1/4 to 1/2%. Anything above that requires a vote of the people. It's called a levied lid lift vote. We did ask the voters to vote for a levied lid lift 2 years ago for improvements to fire protection response times. The voters overwhelmingly, I think 62.4% or so, approved that levied lid lift, or maybe it was 60. Well, it was over 60. Anyway, they approved that levied lid lift, and that's how we were able to grow the property taxes in order to fund the new fire station 82 and also staff it and fund the operational costs for it as well, and also some apparatuses such as fire trucks and ladder trucks as well. Sales tax, that growth has leveled off. It was growing pretty quickly during the periods of high inflation because the sales tax is a percentage of what's sold. So as prices went up for various products, things that were applicable to the sales taxes, the sales tax returns also went up, but those have leveled off over the past 2 years, and we don't see them growing much at all over the next 2 years. The utility tax is another major general revenue source. The city is currently at about the state averages for our 4 utilities that we collect utility tax on. We also collect utility tax on electric as well. But those go under different rules in the state law. We recently increased the utility taxes on the city utilities to pay for indigent defense, which was pretty much an unfunded mandate from the state and the court system, and also to hire another shift of police officers, about 5 new police officers. As we're growing as a city, we needed to have enough police officers per capita to keep up with best practices and other averages of comparable cities, and also to help reduce any crime that and other items that police officers address. The last of the 4 major general revenue sources was a local option business and occupation tax. That is something that Oak Harbor currently doesn't utilize. There are about 50 cities throughout the state of Washington that do utilize the local business and occupation tax. So the Department of Revenue has this list that's online. You can, just go to the Department of Revenue, type in local business and occupation tax, and you'll find this list that's updated once a year. There's 50 cities. The format of this list is the name of the cities on the left, and the rate applicable to manufacturing, retail, services, and wholesale are listed in these 4 columns here. In most cities, they're the same rate throughout. In some cities, it's a little different. Like I guess in Issaquah, it's a little higher for services than it is for retail or wholesale. The last columns, you'll see the tax threshold. What the tax threshold means is that the business in that jurisdiction has to bring in gross receipts greater than those amounts in order to for the tax to be applicable to their gross receipts. So, for example, in Aberdeen, the minimum required by the state is to have a $20,000 tax threshold, which means that if the business grosses less than $20,000 a year or $5,000 a quarter, they do not have to pay the local option business tax. Other cities have higher thresholds. For example, Bremerton and Burlington, they have $1 million thresholds, which means that any business that grosses $1 million or less in revenue would not have to pay the business and occupation tax. It would only be applicable to revenues or gross receipts, they call it at the state, above $1 million. So here's the rest of the 50 cities. You may have noticed there's these little footnotes and marks throughout. The V means that the voters approved a rate greater than the state limit of 0.002. And an E means that these local business and occupation tax rates have been around since prior to January 1st, 1982. There must have been a law change at that time that went into effect that limited them to 0.002 or 1/5 of 1%. And that was about 42 years ago. So those cities have had this local option business tax for quite a while. So just a quick rundown. A local option business tax will need council approval to take effect. The maximum tax rate is 0.002 times gross annual receipts, which is 1/5 of 1%. There are a handful of cities that have higher grandfathered-in rates. The minimum tax threshold, which means that the amount exempt from the tax, is $20,000. And there's no maximum that I found, but what I did find in those 50 cities that I just showed before is that those thresholds range from the 20,000 minimum up to $1 million. And you could always go to the Municipal Resource Service Center website to take a look at the 2024 revenue guide for cities for more detail. They update that revenue guide every year because there's always changes to state law that they want to incorporate into their guide. So back earlier this year, we provided City Council with three options to deliberate over a local option business tax. So option one, option two, and option three. The differences in the option is the business tax threshold. Option one would exempt the first $5 million from the business tax. And when we threw that into the formula, the number of businesses that would be applicable to would be 27, or 1.2% of all Oak Harbor businesses. That means that there's only 27 businesses, or at least the time of the data that we have from the Department of Revenue, there was only 27 businesses that had gross receipts in excess of $5 million. So over here, you see the gross annual receipts. This is the gross annual receipts of those 27 businesses. When you multiply that by the tax rate of 0.002, that equates to an annual revenue generated of $793,000. Now, keep in mind that these are just estimates. It's subject to, the business earnings change on a daily basis. It's of course subject to what's actually being earned at the time this goes into effect, if this goes into effect, and when it actually takes effect too. So some more statistics on option one. The maximum tax bill to, I guess, the largest business, the one that has the most gross receipts, would be $132,000 a year. The minimum bill to, I guess, there must be a business that's just over $5 million in gross receipts, would be about $163. But the median amount, which the median number represents the typical value within a data set. It's a little different than the average, because averages can be skewed by, a few really large businesses. So a median kind of looks at what's the middle number of the 27 businesses. So of those 27 businesses, the median annual tax bill would be about $11,121. With option two, the business tax threshold would be $1 million, which is the highest threshold that we found in the other 50 cities. That would be applicable to 178 businesses, or 8.2% of all businesses within Oak Harbor. The gross annual receipts of those 178 businesses is about $668 million. Multiplied by this tax rate, it would generate $1.3 million for the city, or about $500,000 more than option one. The maximum tax bill would be slightly higher at $140,000. The minimum would be $55. That would be a business that's just over $1 million. And then the median, which represents the typical business of those 178, the tax bill would be about $1,664 a year. And then option three would be a tax threshold of $100,000. That would impact about a quarter, or 26% of all businesses in Oak Harbor. And the gross annual receipts of those 555 businesses is about $939 million. Multiplied again by the tax rate, that would generate about $1.878 million a year, or about $550,000 more than option two. The maximum tax bill would be $142,000. The minimum would be $1. That must be a business right over $100,000. And the median, or the business and occupation annual tax bill for the typical business, or the median business, would be about $800 a year. So a little more details on the actual proposal. The due dates we're proposing to be quarterly. That's subject to discussion. Maybe those can go to annual. We'll have to have a discussion on that. But the proposal that we did submit were quarterly returns, and those returns will be due by the end of the following month. We incorporated the various required exemptions and deductions per state law, and we'd also build them into the Oak Harbor Municipal Code. There's various late fees, underpayments, and interests that vary per these RCWs, and RCWs mean state law. That's the Revised Code of Washington. These are required, and it's really complicated and convoluted, but it's from the state, so we have to follow it. It's like I can't just tell you what they are right now. It depends on a bunch of different variables. Depending on the timing and all this other stuff. Anyway. Um, Electronic payments are preferred. If somebody wants to get a paper form and fill that out and give us a check, that's fine too. But we will, if this was implemented, we will utilize an electronic payment platform that's out there that a bunch of those other 50 cities already utilize. Well, we look at a few of them and see which one is the best value for the city as well. But a number of those cities do use various electronic payment providers. Also, to make things a little bit easier on everybody, we found in some other cities that instead of having to send in your return every quarter saying, I don't owe anything, I'm under the threshold, businesses can submit an exemption form, which will say basically you'd attest that my business does not make over the threshold. And if it ever does make over the threshold, then we will start filing our business and occupation taxes. That will reduce paperwork from both the business point of view and also from the city point of view. And it'll, streamline things on both ends. And also, as required by state law, there's an administrative appeal process included as well. And that's all I have. Well, there is one thing I do have. Let me just stop sharing the presentation. I read this for the previous group. So this is from the MRSC, that's that Municipal Resource Service Center. They have a bunch of information and research on local business and occupation taxes. And there was one statement where they say that business and occupation taxes tend to be unpopular with businesses, whether because the B&O tax is based on their gross receipts rather than net profits, or because it is another tax imposed upon local businesses. Local businesses must decide whether to pass along this tax to the consumer in the form of higher prices, which can raise concerns over competitive pricing for some of the larger businesses, depending on the threshold that's set. On the opposite side of this discussion is the fact that the business and occupation tax helps fund general government services that benefit local businesses. And depending on how the city council, from the feedback they get from the public, decides to utilize the local business tax, the revenues can be restricted to a specific use or multiple uses. So that's the flip side of paying the tax. It goes to actually provide governmental services that end up benefiting either directly or indirectly local businesses. So that's all I have. Back to you, Maggie.
All right, thank you so much, David, for that presentation. Do you have any questions? I did see that someone else joined in. Hi, Beth, welcome. Do you have any questions for David? We also have our City of Oak Harbor Harbor Master for the Marina online too, if there's any questions specifically about the Marina.
I had two questions.
Great.
Great presentation. It answered a lot of the questions that I had. I guess the first one is, and this you may not know yet, the Parks and Rec facility. Do you know where that would go and time frame or what that would all include?
So we currently have funding from the state to do a feasibility study for the Parks and Rec facility. As part of that study, um, we would be looking into the best, optimal location of where that facility could go and how it would have access and how, parking would work, or, folks would be able to access it from different methods of transportation and so on. So that would be all part of the study. And I believe the study will also take into account forums for the public to provide input as well. It's still in the early stages. Information regarding that study will be provided to City Council and also provided on our website, as far as having press releases and having if we have meetings for public input, we'll be providing those out as well in order to move the project further along. Once the study's done and we have a finished study, which pretty much tells us that these are the most feasible options for it to go to, then we need to then figure out a way to go ahead and move forward on constructing the project, which requires money. So
Sure.
whether that money comes from something like a business and occupation tax, which could be part of the solution, we definitely will be going back to the state. We have pretty good relationships with our local state legislatures and other state legislators throughout the other parts of the state through various contacts we have. We will be looking for larger amounts of money for the actual construction of it. And we also, we won't be hesitant to look for federal grants as well, state and federal grants. And we're not really sure what's going to occur with Congress in the next term. We do know that, they did reinstitute something that they used to call earmarks. I know they changed the term for that. And, Congress changed the term for that in the current session. But pretty much there's opportunities for our local congressional representatives to be able to provide community enhancement dollars to various areas within their districts. Like I said, it's unclear if that will continue with the new Congress or what will happen with the federal government going forward. But as we find out how the process is and how things are, happening, we'll definitely keep our eye out and our ears to the ground to ensure that whatever funds we're able to bring back to the city for the things that the community has asked for, we're able to get and move forward with that.
Awesome. Yeah, I know there's a big need for something like that in the community. And just my kids are that age where they're in sports and, swimming and all the things. And just hearing all the parents in the same season of life, there's, people would love to have something like that. So I love that. Um, and then my other question was just the slide that you had where it talked about the different scenarios with the 5 million, 1 million, and 100,000. Um, does that, because I guess the reason I jumped into this meeting today is kind of to fill in, yeah, that one, my brokerage, because I'm a realtor. Would that be applied to the brokerage as a whole or to the agents within that brokerage and their gross revenue? Oh, I think you're on mute.
David, you're on mute.
All right. So here's a list of exemptions, and I believe commissions are exempt, but let me just find it.
Oh.
Monies earned from investments are exempt. Dividends are exempt. Insurance agents are exempt. Sale of real estate or rental income if the lease is for 30 days or more. However, no exemption is permitted by the state for amounts received as commissions on real estate sales.
Okay,
So
so it would apply to commissions.
it would apply to the commissions, yeah. Yeah, so according to this state law here, so.
So it would apply to commissions. Okay. Perfect. That answers my question. And then do you have any idea when this could go into effect?
Well, it would depend on the decision from the city council. We're exploring, in addition to the business and occupation tax, we're exploring other methods for funding some of those items on that community request slide. And but the way we had it designed is we wanted to give businesses time to prepare, for the implementation of such a tax. So we put a 6 month, like we're not required to give 6 months, but we said as a fairness, we should provide a 6 month window for businesses to prepare for the tax. And then the tax would go into effect after that 6 month window. And then the tax itself wouldn't be due until, if we're doing it quarterly, it wouldn't be due until 30 days after the end of that first quarter. So if it went into effect, let's say it went into effect July 1st, that's the beginning of the third quarter. First of all, we would not, we'd make sure that if it was passed, we'd have 6 months between the time it was passed and the time it took into effect. So this is all hypothetical. So let's just say, instead, let's just say 2026. Let's say it took effect in January 1st, 2026. we had to make sure it was 6 months from the time it was passed to the time it took effect. And the actual first tax bill, if we do it quarterly, would not be due until 30 days after March 30th, or no, March 31st.
Okay. And when would the city council be making a decision?
We're exploring different options. We're looking at like a port district, for example, as an option to fund the marina, although that's only going to solve one of those 4 items. And there's other items too that we didn't put on the list that the community was asking for that, there's so many, but those were the 4 biggest ones. Some of them are smaller, like 50,000 or 20, we could handle it different ways. But it's unclear right now. My advice would be to keep your ear out, watch the videos of the city council meetings. We publish the minutes as well. We publish the agenda. Also, I believe, Maggie, you will be keeping track of the people who joined us. And if the time comes where it does go in front of city council to discuss specifically the B&O tax, maybe we can send out a email specifically to the people who joined us for this session and the previous session to let them know that, hey, you were interested in the B&O tax, you attended our informational session, and now we're going to be talking about it a little bit further with the elected officials, and here's the time to give your input, to the elected officials. Of course, you can give your input anytime you want to elected officials, but
Sure.
if they're going to be talking about that item specifically, that would be an ideal time to provide that input as well. So,
Okay. Yeah, sounds awesome. Thank you so much for all the information and for answering my questions.
oh, absolutely. Thank you for your questions.
All right, any other questions? Right. We will be following up, like David said, with an email to our attendees from the previous session and this session. But you're always welcome to reach out to myself, or if you ever need to make a public comment, you can do that on the website as well. But yeah, please do not hesitate to reach out with any questions. Thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it, and we will keep everyone informed as best as we can. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.